slightly ashamed now. So, strategy time. In this talk, we're going to demystify strategic leadership. How do you become more strategic as a leader? Step 1 is have a strategy. Step 2, implement your strategy. Step 3, profit. And that's it. Thank you so much for having me today. Now, I'm just kidding, you're not getting rid of me just yet. And I have a little bit more than just that prepared. But even though, to be honest, this is exactly what a lot of books about strategy felt like to me. And you may feel the same way. And it may feel like strategy just isn't for you. It's something that your boss would be working on, or something that you just don't have time for. But does this look like your pile of to-dos? Are you swimming in useless meetings? Are you trying to climb out of a pile of tactical work? Or are you aiming for a promotion? Is your team struggling with prioritizing work? Are they demotivated or struggling with decision-making? Does your team feel like changes are always coming out of the blue? If you said yes to any of these questions, chances are that you, my friend, too, need strategy. Many leaders I work with have answered yes to at least one or several of those questions. From senior engineers, staff engineers, to principal engineers, engineering managers, VPs, and CTOs. No matter what level you're at, I'll show you some principles and tools that you can apply to become a more strategic leader today. But strategic leadership in and of itself is a quite nebulous concept that isn't very often explained, and something that also gets thrown around a lot without much detail. And I promise you, this cat riding a unicorn with a rainbow in the background is not the explanation that I'm going to give you today. I have a little bit more. Fair warning though, I will probably say strategic quite a lot. If you manage to count how many times I say it, I'll give you a special prize later. So let's start with the basics and take this idea of strategic leadership apart. And also start with what it's not. Strategic leadership is not spending your entire day in back-to-back meetings that are focused on running your team and spending your entire time firefighting and responding to emails or Slack messages and just focusing on your teams or organization. That's what it's not. So what is strategy? Strategy means setting goals and priorities. This can also include risks, challenges, and obstacles. It means determining actions to achieve those goals, mobilizing limited resources to execute the actions. And this is where your tactics happen. Strategy is also an explicit acknowledgement of what you're not doing, and that part is really important. Strategy outlines an intent for the future, whereas tactics turn this intent into action. Strategies define what and why we're intending to do things, and the tactics outline how. Strategy looks more outward, like at the market, at the world around us, whereas tactics look much more inward, like what people do we have available? What capabilities do those people have? What are our budgets? And strategy looks at effectiveness, as in doing the right thing, whereas tactics are about efficiency, like doing it with as little cost and other resources used as possible. I love hiking. These photos are from a hike in Sardinia I did just a couple months ago in Italy. And this was in autumn, and I love thinking about strategic leadership in a similar way as with a hike in an unknown area. I didn't know this area very well, even though I'd been to Sardinia previously, and I selected a destination on a map. I wanted to go to this mountaintop that you see in the background. I checked a route, and I selected my gear. I had my hiking boots, my backpack, my sunscreen. Didn't bring enough sunscreen, but that's for another time. And then I took some turns along the way that would ultimately get me closer to this mountaintop I wanted to get to. On the way, I would look at the mountain to make sure that I was moving in the right direction, and I also used a compass, that's just for narrative, in reality it was my phone's GPS, to make sure that I was moving in the right direction. But I also kept my eyes on the ground because I personally stumbled quite easily, and there were a lot of rocks and very thorny bushes. I had very scratched up legs afterwards. The gear was not very good, but that's also for another time. So I like thinking about this exactly in the same way as we think about leadership, as horizons. There is in the background your strategy, your destination that you're moving towards. In the foreground, you have your tactics and actions. You look at your feet or at the rocks around you just to make sure that you're still not stumbling. And then you may also have a longer-term vision in the background that's much more expansive. So strategic leadership is really leading daily from an idea of the future, having this big picture of what you're trying to get to and taking daily actions to move you over there. And strategic leadership is really, really important. First of all, it helps you make you a better leader and increase your impact. It helps you make better decisions, decrease the risk of wasting your own time or your team's time on low-impact work. It helps you operate at a higher level and set much more impactful priorities. And strategic leadership is one of the biggest differentiators that I've seen in my entire career when it comes to leaders' growth. It's also foundational for building high-performing teams. It helps teams align their work with corporate strategy. Like 14% of employees feel they have a clear understanding of how their company's strategy and direction actually work. 14%, that's not a lot of people. But when people do know it, it can be hugely motivating, can help people understand the impact that they're making. And it also helps them handle change because they see the bigger picture of what you're trying to do. And it also helps teams be more autonomous because they know where you're going, so they can figure out the tactics, the rocks and the pebbles on the ground themselves. And strategic leadership is for everyone. That is a fundamental belief that I have. It doesn't depend on your role, on your level, on your title, where you're at in your organization. You can figure out what scope strategy has for you depending on your sphere of influence. Maybe it's the strategy for your team, about several teams, or an entire organization. You too can be a strategic leader there and use the scope that you have to make a difference. Now, you may think, hey, Lena, this sounds really convincing so far. So why are we not all strategic leaders all the time? Well, here's why. Strategic leadership takes work. It requires effort. When I start working with engineering leaders and organizations, one of the first questions I ask them is, what are you spending your time on versus what should you be spending your time on? The number one question by far, the number one answer by far is, I'm spending my time in meetings, on tactical work, and I'm never doing enough time on strategy. Everyone's struggling with this. Strategic leadership also requires context switching, which is really hard on our brains. We need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, and that's mentally really tough. It also needs to be balanced with tactical work. You can't just look at the mountain all the time. You also do need to look at the path you're walking on. And it can bring even more change. Strategy can also mean that you're saying no to work that a team has spent a lot of investments in, or work that a team would be excited to keep doing. And then you have to stop that in favor of more impactful work. Strategy is also intentionally a bet on the future. We're setting strategy with incomplete information. And that in itself can also feel uncomfortable and insecure. Strategic leadership also goes against our cognitive wiring. Our cognitive biases make us much more inclined to focus on what we know, what's familiar, what's near to us. And that shows in how we spend our time, the things we think about in our actions. But strategic leadership requires seeking out new information, the unknown. And that's really uncomfortable for us. And then there's the toughest one of all. Because strategic leadership means saying no to near-term work, also known as those dopamine-hitting, quickly done tasks. Did you ever dive into your emails or Slack only to then realize 3 hours later how much time had gone by? Whenever we solve urgent problems or we complete small tasks, we get a small hit of the neurotransmitter dopamine. It helps us feel good. And these dopamine hits can be really, really tempting. We're more likely to prioritize tasks with a deadline over tasks without one, even though the tasks without deadlines have much higher longer-term rewards. That's called the mere urgency effect. And all of those things are at least one of the reasons why so many of us are so bad at prioritizing the really important work and instead focus on emails, to-dos, firefighting, or why you can still find many startup and scale-up CTOs doing incident response in a 500-person organization. And I don't blame them. So you will have to trick your brain into doing strategic work. Because strategic leadership means delaying gratification, and that can even feel bad initially. And now that I've really hyped you up about strategic work, let's talk about why it's so important and how to do it. And the first one I'll tell you is that strategic work is leadership hygiene. It's not something you do once a year. It's something that you do every single day. And I'm going to tell you how. How do you actually lead strategically every single day? First of all, you're going to have a strategy. That is the only point on my slide that wasn't lying. We start with a strategy that's documented, and if you don't know your company's or your team's strategy, spend a little time finding it. This document should cover a longer-term horizon. Now, what longer-term means can likely vary quite greatly, depending on how big your organization is, what size, what stage it's in, and also which industry your organization's in. But as a rule of thumb, it should typically cover between 6 and 12 months into the future. Relevant artifacts to look for can be a document with the title strategy. That's the easy one. Then a roadmap, corporate goals, North Star metrics, investor pitch decks, or you have a different type of goal-setting framework that your organization uses, something longer term. If you've never written a strategy but you want to write one, I have a simple template linked from the link that you see at the bottom right of the slides under bit.ly/strategy time. But we're still not done here. You're still not getting rid of me. Because, and this one is important, strategic leadership isn't about the documents you write. It's about your habits. The way that you think and spend your time is the kind of leader you are. A while back, I was trying to figure out how to be a more strategic leader and how to go from, well, there are some strategy docs that we have to actually leading strategically. And I realized that I needed to start with how I spent my own time, because my meeting calendar was running my life and honestly also ruining my life. And it might run or ruin yours too. So over the next minutes, I'm going to share with you a framework that I've developed for myself to help me actually have a structure for being a more strategic leader. Who of you actually wants to get better at this? Raise your hand. Okay, awesome, I see you. That's about maybe 3/4 of the audience. Awesome. So everyone who just raised your hand, get your phone out or your calendar, because you're going to need it in a second. We're going to make this happen today. So strategic leadership is a habit, and I want to show you how to build this habit. There are two really crucial elements of strategic leadership. The first one is you need to be able to zoom out. Have space and time to actually think about the big picture. This is a satellite photo of North America, by the way, in case you didn't recognize. And the second part, though, is you also need to be able to zoom in. Not just look at the mountain, but also look at the path in front of you. So taking actions, setting boundaries, saying no so you can focus. We already established focus is a big part of strategy. And then also broadcasting and communicating what you're thinking about and doing. Habit building takes humans quite a lot of time. It takes us usually more than 2 months to even establish a habit, 66 days to be exact, and up to 254 days, that's over 8 months, I did the math for you, until it's actually fully formed. And habits need action, so space, thinking, action, boundaries, and broadcasting. And now we're going to repeat that, because the repetition is where the habit is built. We're going to repeat that daily, weekly, and then every quarter. And this is where I introduce you to the bagel of strategy, or a donut if you choose so. This is the West Coast after all. And maybe you already guessed it. There's also a beautiful acronym behind it. So you can take a stab at the bagel of strategy every day. I swear I'm not done with the puns, actually. I don't want to overpromise. So STAB is the framework that I developed to make strategic leadership a habit for myself, and that you can use to make it a habit for you too. And we're going to dive into each of these frequencies and the whole zooming in and zooming out part. And with each of those, I will have a couple of things that you can already put in your calendar, so keep your phone ready. So take a stab at strategy every day. Let's get going. Every day, make space for strategic thinking. Start your workday with 15 minutes of strategy time. 15 minutes because everyone has 15 minutes. I've done this exercise with many people, from CEOs to engineering leaders and technical leaders. Everyone has 15 minutes. Do it at the start of your day because, as I mentioned, we need to trick our brains into doing this. Once we open our laptops, we get sucked into busy work very, very easily. So if you do this before you open your laptop, you have a much easier time actually making that space. So start fresh, And think about questions like the 4 ones you see here. Those are suggestions. You can also make them your own. Think about what's the most important thing for us as an organization? What are we not doing to accomplish it? How can I help my team draw connections between their work and our strategy? And how am I investing in capabilities to get us closer to the strategy? Repeat this daily on your work days, not on the weekends. And over time, you will build 2 things. First of all, you will have a notebook or document with a gathering of strategic thoughts, which you can reuse over time and which will become a really valuable resource. Second of all, you will also build a habit of thinking strategically more, which will also then start showing up in the rest of your days. So use your calendar now, put in a 15-minute block for the start of your workday, make it repeating on every weekday, and start with that next Monday. Next Monday seems realistic. I'll give you a little time because I have a couple more things for every workday that you can do, so you can put in that reminder for yourself now. Another daily action is asking strategic questions. This is a relatively simple tool that you can use in any conversation you have, in your one-on-ones, in your planning meetings, in meetings with peers or stakeholders. And the whole idea is to help you and the people you're talking to zoom out and look at the bigger picture again. Some questions are, what business problem are we trying to solve? What assumptions are we making? Like, challenge the status quo by looking at what's actually going into the way you're working or the way you're doing things in terms of assumptions. How does this issue affect other parts of our business? How will it move us toward our strategy? And what's the long-term impact? Again, questions to zoom out. You can use these in a variety of meetings and also when you're communicating with your team. They'll appreciate hearing about these things as well. So now we've made some space and time to think about strategy. We have some first actions through strategic questions, but now we still got to set boundaries and broadcast the whole thing. And you still have that mountain of to-dos that you need to work through. And there's only one question that I'm giving you for prioritizing your work, which is, what should I stop doing today? This question is a technique called inversion, where usually we would probably ask, like, what should I do today? But it's a question that many of us are used to, and so it can be really hard to actually come up with good things. And honestly, many organizations I've worked with, and that you probably work with too, everything is important at all times. Everything's on fire at all times. So there is no way to actually prioritize. I regularly see organizations that have 7 focus areas. Like, that's not what a focus area was supposed to be. So ask, what are we not doing? What should I stop doing? And then prioritize accordingly. You can use this technique with yourself, and we'll also use a similar technique for prioritizing with teams later. And then broadcast it for alignment. Make sure that your boss knows. Maybe you have a daily stand-up where you communicate what you're doing or what you're not doing. Or you just have a weekly status email that you share with your boss, whatever the frequency there is, but always be broadcasting. So we have daily actions. We make 15-minute space of strategy time for thinking. We ask strategic questions, and we prioritize by figuring out what we're not doing. Now, weekly. Weekly stays for strategy thinking. You can again put 30 minutes time in your calendar now. I used to do it on a Friday because Friday was my space for reflecting on the week. Maybe another day works better for you. Start with 30 minutes and make it your strategic thinking time to look at the bigger landscape. Specifically, you can look at areas like the world, like what big world events are going on. The economic situation was mentioned earlier already. We still have a pandemic. There are other bigger things. You can also look at your industry and trends. Maybe some reports are coming out from bigger events, or you've been at a conference. What trends are you seeing? What's going on in your company and the customers? Maybe you can get some customer reports. And also what's going on in your department and teams. Take a look at all of these things and think about, what are you seeing and hearing, and what could it mean for our company? You don't have to act on anything, but the main purpose is for you to develop a sense of the bigger picture around you. Then we're going to act strategically again. Leaders make a ton of decisions, and decision-making can be really hard because, again, it deals with a lot of uncertainties. And at the same time, decisions have to be made. And this model here is one that I like to use because it pushes you to thinking about longer-term consequences. It's called second-order thinking. You may have heard of it. And the whole idea is essentially, in the first line on the right-hand side, you write down the decision you want to make and its immediate benefits and consequences. Then you go one level lower. Think about the future consequences, benefits, and drawbacks of those. And then you go one more level down and think about the future consequences of those. So it gets very complicated to explain, but it's actually pretty straightforward once you do it, because the whole purpose is that we often make decisions thinking mostly about the near term and about what we already know. But this exercise forces us to get much deeper into the things that we don't know yet, the uncertainties and the longer term perspective. Once you have this written out, you're going to choose options from the second and third layer, because those are the options that may have short-term pain, but will offer you longer-term benefits. The second thing you're going to do is set a reminder for yourself. So you've made your decision, put a reminder in your calendar 3 months and 6 months from now. And at that point, you will revisit the decision. Review, how did things pan out? What did you learn about it? What went well, what didn't go well? And this is a really simple and straightforward way to improve your decision-making, because it's going to help you not just make decisions faster, but also make decisions with longer-term impact and learn from them at the same time. So we have weekly strategic reflection time and research, and we're making decisions more strategically. The other point is to connect our teams with strategy. I mentioned earlier that teams understanding the impact that their work has is hugely motivating and is a huge factor in team resilience. You can use the questions here in your one-on-ones, in your planning, in meetings with stakeholders, in retrospectives. Ask things like, why are we not doing something? What does success look like? How does our work connect with the big picture? And also share with your teams what you learned. You've done the information gathering, you've done your daily strategic thinking. Share this with your teams. Let them know what you're hearing, what you're thinking, because it will also help them develop more strategic leadership and develop more skills in this area. So that was the week already. No, it wasn't. Surprise. So I forgot the boundaries in broadcasting. Well, I forgot, but the slides didn't. So we're going to set boundaries in broadcast again. I mentioned earlier the same daily prioritization that you can do for yourself, you can also do weekly with your teams. Many people do weekly planning sessions, or you have a fortnightly sprint planning, adjusted to the cadence that works for you. And again, help your teams focus on what matters. Discuss with them, where can we add the highest value? What's most important for the organization? What can we also do to achieve more, better, faster? That goes to the resources part of the strategy that we saw earlier when we introduced the concept. And again, what should we stop doing? Strategy is also a statement about what we're not doing, and it's about explicitly saying no. Never forget that. So now we're done with the weekly cadence. We have weekly reflection time, 30 minutes thinking about the bigger picture and landscape. We have making strategic decisions, and we're also going to set boundaries and broadcast with our teams when we prioritize. Quarterly. Chose a quarterly cadence because it's very easily scalable. What happens quarterly will automatically also happen annually. And it's also one that a lot of companies operate under. Like many companies do quarterly goal setting, like OKRs, SMART goals, whatever your framework of choice is. So some quarterly actions. And because we're on a bigger cadence, we're also going to zoom out a little bit more. And again, we make space for thinking and learning. And in this case, it's about reflecting on the previous quarter for yourself, as well as with your team. Think about it as a bigger retrospective, where like in a retrospective, you'd probably review the previous sprint with your team, and in this case, you review the previous quarter. Think about what you learned when it comes to decisions you made, progress, risks that came up, impediments that you faced, and what's working and what's not. And then discuss how you're going to apply these lessons. The whole purpose here is, again, to think about a bigger cadence than you would normally, and be able to learn at that higher level cadence as well. An additional space for strategic thinking will be a strategic review every quarter. The whole idea here is really that strategy shouldn't be a document that lives in a drawer somewhere and that just gets taken out maybe every 10 years and otherwise just sits there collecting dust. Maybe not if it's in a drawer, but you get the metaphor. And strategy should be a document that you actively use and that you also actively revisit on a regular basis to check, is this actually still the thing that we want to go towards? Is this still the mountain that I want to walk to? Or has the scenery changed and I actually want to go over there? This is a framework that I adapted from Seymour Tiles, and it's very abstract if you read it like this, but I'll explain to you what the specific sections mean. The whole idea is essentially just to check, does our strategy as it is still work with what's around it, so the environment, and with the organization that we are? So there's internal consistency, like maybe your processes have changed or your organization has grown very drastically. So the organization you have may actually have troubles actually achieving the strategy as it is. So maybe your strategy needs to change or the organization needs to shift. There's also consistency with the environment. Are there bigger market changes? Has a big competitor just bought out another competitor? Whatever it is, but are these things influencing the strategy that you have, and do you need to adapt it? Available resources. Maybe your teams have all taken trainings and they're doing much better in something that's strategically important, so you may be able to accelerate some parts of your strategy. Then there's the degree of risk. Are we still willing to take this risk? Is it too big? Is it too little? The time horizon. Is this actually still the right time span? Maybe we need to accelerate some of it. Maybe we need to expand. You get the gist. So it's essentially looking at what's around us and what's in the organization and checking if the strategy is still workable also. Workability really means, do we have alignment internally? Is everyone on the same page that we want to use the strategy? And is it usable for us to actually make decisions? That's your strategic review. Do it once a quarter, but you may also have to do it either more frequently if you're in a really high growth organization, or you may have to do it less frequently if your organization is a bit bigger already. And it can also be prompted, this kind of review, by external events. Maybe there's an M&A in your company, so an acquisition or a merger took place, there were layoffs, or you went for hypergrowth. All of those can also be events that trigger a review of strategy again. In the end, you will have an understanding of the strategy, if it's still workable and useful, and how to proceed with it. Then again, quarterly planning, I mentioned it, most companies do it, or many at least. Plan with your team again in alignment with strategy. Look at where you're now. This is called a situation assessment, Where do you want to be? So the strategic direction, how do you plan to get there? That's where you plan your tactics, your implementation, and then how you monitor progress. So visibility into, are you actually moving in the right direction? And again, what will we not do? It's probably one of the biggest questions you'll take away from today. So that's strategic planning for you. And to make this a bit easier, because I know I just gave you a ton of questions and you probably won't remember all of them, I put together a strategic cheat sheet. You can download this under the link that you find here, under bit.ly/strategy time, and it contains the entire STAB framework for space thinking, action, boundaries, and broadcasting. And you can download this for yourself, but you can also share it with your teams. Maybe you have people who you're trying to help become more strategic leaders, and help them by having access to easy resources that they can use and incorporate into their daily work. Because I want to make strategic leadership more accessible to people, because I believe everyone can truly do this if you just have a couple of tools. So start being a strategic leader today. Because the way that you think and spend your time is the kind of leader that you are. And strategic leadership means leading every single day from an idea for the future, our strategy. So fight the urge back to get sucked back into busy work, because thinking strategically is your work and it needs to be your priority as a leader. Use the STAB framework. So take a stab at the bagel of strategy every single day. Make space, think about it, or at the donut of strategy. Make space, think about it, act on it, set boundaries, and then broadcast to your bosses, stakeholders, and your teams. And I have one last hot tip for you. While you start doing all of the things that I just told you, also just say strategic a little bit more often. Based on my experience, it does a great part in helping people understand that you too are indeed a strategic leader. And by the way, for all of you who kept count, I said strategic and strategy 166 times during, 106 times during this presentation. Thank you very much for having me. I'll be in the office hours from 11:20. Find me there to talk about all things strategic leadership. I'm Lena Reinhard. Thank you very much.